All right, we are live. All right, hello everyone. I am Dan Kimbrough, tech director for SCRANTON Fringe Festival. I also run Park Multimedia, which is a small media production company. Does content marketing and other things throughout their area. I am trying my best tonight to fill in for Connor and hosting these conversations that we're having with Fringe with different individuals. Tonight's conversation is going to be with Erica Smith. Erica graduated from Marywood University, cum laude with a bachelor's degree in philosophy and pre-PA studies with minors in history, astronomy, and bioethics. She attends Sweetbriar College currently and is the college's first trans woman to attend, and will soon be the first trans woman athlete in the NCAC conference. Erica is an active trans plus transgendered activist, speaks on various transgender-related topics, community building, mental health, and more. She enjoys building computers, drawing, painting, reading, and spending time with her dog, Nina. And so we're going to go ahead and bring her in now and welcome Erica.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
Good. As you can tell, I'm in the middle of packing, so my is atrocious.
No worries, no worries. I'm not even at home. I'm actually visiting a friend in Kansas City, so I had to put this together last minute to be able to do it. So no worries at all. So reading over your bio and the information you sent me, I feel completely overwhelmed doing this. So you seem to have done a lot. I want to talk, I guess, to sort of begin with, given sort of what's happening in baseball and all these other fields right now, as far as sports, this COVID return and you being an athlete, what do you think are some of the issues that are going to, within the trans community, but just also within the athletic community in general, do you think we're going to get a chance to return to sports? Like, will you have a season this year?
So we've been told that we are not going to have a season this fall. I'm playing for the field hockey team, and we will hopefully be returning in the spring. So this fall, we're going to be focusing on a lot of, practicing and stuff like that, which in my opinion, sometimes I think that's a good thing. Like it's that whole take a step back. Let's reevaluate our team, our like the practices we do. Let's get closer as a team, and then we can come in like ready to go for the spring or whenever your like sport goes. So I think like there's a silver lining. I'm annoyingly optimistic sometimes. So, but it is, on one end, it's frustrating, right?
Yeah.
On the other end, if we don't take precautions now, then we might be delaying the spring season again, which would be even more upsetting. So I think it's one of those where let's just get it over with and try to get it so that way the world kind of returns a little bit to normal.
Gotcha. And so at Sweetbriar, you're the first trans woman to attend Sweetbriar overall, right?
So I believe I'm the second.
Okay.
To my knowledge, I'm the first degree-seeking trans student.
Okay.
So there was a trans woman. She's such an amazing woman where she took courses there, but they have a policy where your birth certificate needs to say female. And I don't think that's, like, in a normal world, that's I understand that. There are ways people who are trans can change. But currently there are a lot of states that aren't allowing it, or there are a lot of barriers and difficulties. So I think that's a heavy conversation to have. But so to my knowledge, I will be the first degree-seeking and matriculating student at this particular all-women's college.
All right. Can you talk about that a little bit? Just sort of what does that feel like for you?
Oh my God, I'm terrified. I'm excited. I'm like thrilled. I'm nervous. There's so many things because on one end, like I'm just trying to go to school. Like I'm just trying to go be with my class. And the thing about a lot of women's colleges is they usually have tight-knit communities, and this community is no different. In fact, I would say it's incredibly supportive and kind and empowering. I've already made so many friends with faculty, staff, and students.
Okay.
I've had a lot of really positive experiences. I don't think I've really had any negative. But I think for me, I do kind of have that little birdie in my ear, like, okay, you're kind of being a little bit of a representative. Don't like go get wasted and get arrested, because that would probably look bad. So
that's funny, and I think you're spot on. I think that's the crux of being anyone from a marginalized group, is that if you're the first to do something, or you're sort of alone in a space, you become the mouthpiece for that entire community. And so, were you able to go to other schools? Like, did you get a scholarship? Why did you intentionally pick an all-women's school, or did it just work out that this was the school for you and you were willing to overcome any hurdle that would show up?
So I actually really like that you asked that, because I was thinking about that yesterday. So I was at Marywood in the graduate mental health counseling program, and without getting into too many details, it was not a good experience. Marywood itself, I love the school.
Mm-hmm.
Undergrad, amazing. This program, just the professors, the environment, it was very toxic. It was very fear-focused. Like, you know, they were instilling fear in us that we were going to screw up, and that's why we needed to be better. And I'm like,
gotcha.
Or like, and plus, I was coming out as trans. There were some people that didn't agree. So I knew I had to change the location I was at.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I had to go somewhere, and I was looking for like medical schools and stuff. And I saw Cedar Crest College. I'm like, oh, all women's school. That'd be interesting. I wonder. And about 12 years ago, I dated a girl who went to Sweetbriar. And I went there as her date for one of the formal dances they had. And I remember when I went there, this was 2008, it was such a different, empowering, comfortable feeling for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know I was trans at the time. I knew I had these thoughts, but I wasn't accepting of it.
Okay.
So it's not like I had this intention of, yes, I'm coming back. But I remember thinking at the time, I'll never be able to have to be able to come to a community like this. And so I reached out, I looked there. And what really sealed the deal was I was supposed to go down and visit in person.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a big snowstorm in March, because northeastern Pennsylvania.
Indeed.
Yeah. And so I told them, yeah, we had a snowstorm, I couldn't go. I got a handwritten letter from them. And admissions does this sometimes, but they'll like handwrite it in a blank forum notice, you know?
Right.
They mentioned specifically like the snowstorm that I said why I couldn't come. And you know, they didn't have it. It's Virginia. And I was like, wow, they listened. That's different. I'm not. Mm-hmm. One of the things they don't tell you when you transition from male to female is you're going to a world where, as a woman, a lot of people don't listen to you. So hearing that, I started talking to them more, doing research, and the questions came up.
Okay.
Oh, so your name is different on your transcripts. Your high school says male. And I explained to them, and they were very, like, it's not that they ignored it, but they're like, oh, okay, that's all we needed to know. And then they just proceeded to treat me like every other girl there.
That's amazing. That is awesome.
That's like, I think that's one of the things we never think about when it comes to, you know, advocacy of oppressed and marginalized groups, is we just want to be like everyone else. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the focus is too much, like, oh, you're a trans woman, you're a Black man, you're an Asian woman. Like, they focus on these tiny little essentialized demographics, and it reminds us sometimes, like, crap, I am different.
Right. I agree 100%.
So I think their approach of like, you're just like every other girl here. I have no restrictions of housing, of bathrooms. I mean, they don't really have men's bathrooms. Even the sports team, they were just like, do you fall under the NCAA rules? Yes. Okay. So that's
awesome.
Yeah. And like I said, everybody's been really supportive. And I think they should really be commended on the way they approached it. Mm-hmm. They didn't ignore the fact, but they didn't come in and start treating me very differently.
Right. No, I get that. I get that 100%. So, and I think you're right. That's it's one of those things that when somebody recognizes you for something, and it's just for being a human, as opposed to a human in this box, whatever boxes you have, it's comforting, because at first you're like, well, wait a minute, do they not notice? And it's like, oh wait, you don't care. That's amazing, and I don't have to deal with that anymore. So that's awesome. That's hats off to them for doing that. So, and so thinking about the idea of being a trans athlete, and I know you're doing a lot of work with mental health. What is, for you personally, sort of, how are you preparing for other teams? Like, yes, Sweetbriar is great, and the girls you're going to be playing with, that's your team, and eventually there'll be fans in the stands someday. But you're playing against other schools, and how do you sort of mentally prepare? And I guess also talk about mental health when it comes to other trans athletes. Like, what are some of the things that you do to prepare, or just get your mind straight to know that this may not be a great game, and it may not be the field that's the issue. It could be the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's a tough question, and the way I think of it, I think, is not what people expect. So, if you go to any sports game, go to a Phillies game or like the Eagles. If the Eagles lose, people start fires. Like, so
if the Eagles win, people start fires.
And so reminding myself of that, I need to remind myself and keep aware that, okay, people are very passionate for some reason about sports and their idea of sports. And that's a whole other topic of like, should trans women compete? Should trans men compete? And I obviously think they should.
Right.
Like, I think for me personally, I'm just making sure all of my coping skills are set, because what they never tell you in counseling, in getting mental health treatment, transitioning, doing anything, is you don't hit this magical wall and all of a sudden everything's sunshine and rainbows. To feel happy, you have to feel sad.
Right.
One can't exist without the other, and you're human, so you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. So have like these strong coping mechanisms and develop a self-awareness of, hey, I'm feeling this right now. I've got these fans calling me names. I'm getting these threats. I'm getting people saying things. And, it's like, okay, am I going to let them penetrate my thinking and what I think about myself? Or am I going to be aware, okay, I'm feeling this right now. Take some time after the game or whatever, and I write, I draw, I sing, I just do silly things sometimes. Whatever your coping mechanisms are, have those ready and be willing to acknowledge, hey, I need to take a break. And I'm also thankful that and reach out for help. Like my teammates, I haven't met a lot of them yet, but my coach has made it very clear, if something happens, we will be behind you 100%. You're, a vixen. Our mascot is a vixen. So you're one of us. And yeah, I love the mascot. That's a big fan of ours. But yeah, so it's like, remember, you've got a team there behind you, and not all teams get along.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you guys are there for each other. So reach out if you're struggling. It's like in the Army. I didn't get along with everyone in my unit when I was in combat arms, but I knew that if I was struggling, I could reach out to any one of them and at least someone would listen. Yeah. So don't forget that part. Have your coping skills, but don't forget to reach out to your team, because they will have your back. I promise.
Awesome. That is awesome. I'm glad that that's the environment that you have there, because you're right. Teams don't always get along. I remember when I played football in high school, there are folks while in high school that I thoroughly hated, even when I was in college, who I'm best friends with now, but there were certain days that I wish they were on the other team so I could have teed off against them. So yeah, that's a good mentality. You mentioned your service. So when did you begin your transition?
So I will start this off by saying that whatever I say, my views are not representative of the United States Army. Yep. I'm still serving. So I have to say that. But I started my transition March 18th, 2019, officially. Okay. Not through the military, but civilian side. And that's when I started hormone therapy. And about 7 months later, I started socially transitioning, which means, presenting as who I felt comfortable as, who I am. So it was around that time that I came out to the military. And the trans ban was fully in effect. Okay. There's a policy in there that states if you have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria before April 19th of 2019, or April 12th, I believe, you're grandfathered in, which meant that you could serve, you could get treatment, everything. And to be clear, all of my medical treatments and stuff, I've paid for out of my own pocket or insurance, not through the military, because a lot of people, I think that that's what it is. Yeah, I think they're like, well, why am I paying all these tax dollars to the military so someone can transition? It's like, well, actually, last year we spent $82 million on erectile dysfunction medication for the military service. And someone did the math, and they were like, if we treated all of the trans soldiers, it would be about $11 million as a one-time cost. Oh my God. It's when people talk about costs, I don't think people actually realize what the military actually spends its money on. But you have to remember also, its budget is billions of dollars. So that 82 million is a drop in the bucket. Like,
that's crazy. Well, it's funny that you bring up the erectile dysfunction for numerous reasons. But I think that we don't think about, like, in general, if you are serving and you have healthcare, we are paying for anything that you do. And so if we're willing to cover healthcare for anyone for anything else, why should this be different? Yes, it's your tax dollars, but it should all be covered. So that's crazy to think about that. And so you were no longer active when you chose to start the transition, the going through hormones and everything else. I guess sort of mentally, and sort of when did you said when you were younger, you knew, but you were fighting it. I guess sort of when in your life was there that moment, and then was there a struggle, or was it you needed to find the right time?
I think it was a combination of a struggle and finding the right time. It was when it would have been October 2018 when I finally accepted it. And before this moment, I had been in pretty significant counseling for about 3 years, twice a week, every week, of going in and not even going in for gender dysphoria and trans stuff, for other things, PTSD, sexual abuse and sexual trauma and everything like that. And there was always that like dead air in this topic. And she knew, my counselor, like she's an expert at this, she knows, but she never pushed it. She knew that. And sometimes when she did, she would like try to push it a little bit. I would not show up for like 2 weeks. But it's like, okay, I was like that far of like, I did everything I could to try to convince myself I was something else other than trans, because I grew up in a very rural area, and I grew up in this idea that, well, but trans women are the early 90s idea of like men in trying to find young girls and do sexual abuse, which is not true and has never been proven, and there's never been a conviction or anything like that. But at the time, that was the fear, and I didn't know anybody that was trans. I didn't know the truth. And so I let that fear and that propaganda kind of cloud my judgment and control my life. And so it wasn't until I started unraveling those fears, unraveling those doubts, those what ifs, unraveling that like really deep set pain of hating who I was, because I'm like, I'm not a bad person. Why do I deserve this? And, and it took a lot of time, effort, and patience. And it was after, it was around October 2018, I finally went into my counselor's office, and I was like, we were talking about it, and I was like, I think I'm trans. And she's like, thank God. She's like, I'm not, like, she's like, it's not that I knew, but she's like, we've been working so hard for this.
Oh my God, I love it. I love everything about that.
Our relationship is very, like, it's very therapeutic in a sense of like, she has no problem at this point calling me out on stuff. I'll say, I don't want to talk about it. She's like, then why are you here? And I was like,
that's amazing.
Fair point. So, but yeah, so it's like within counseling and therapy, it's not the Freudian, I'm going to sit on a couch and tell you all my problems. For me, I wanted a conversation between two people, and that's what I got. Except the person I was talking to was an expert.
Right.
So, if you are, like, I would say, if anyone's out there struggling or trying to find a counselor or not sure, go through, try different ones. It took me about 10 counselors till I found the one I'm with now, and it breaks my heart that like I have to terminate with her because she can't practice outside of state.
Oh man, that's correct. That's terrible. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's okay because she helped me learn and realize how to have the skills to work further, and she even worked with me to find somebody down closer there.
Okay.
So she's very good at what she does, and I think if you find a counselor like that, they hold on to it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's amazing. That's awesome. What did it feel like to admit it? Like I can only imagine people, no matter what they're dealing with in life, but once you finally admit or sort of get to that clarity point, what was that like? What was the emotion like?
Rock bottom.
Really?
In my mind, I was like, okay, I have finally accepted this, that this is potentially, I never wanted to say definitely, because I always wanted that like escape route, of, not really sure if I want to do this or not. And like, what if I'm unsure? But it felt like rock bottom, because I'm like, oh my God, you know, my family's going to not want to be with me. I'm going to get hurt. I'm going to get oppression, and like people are going to be against me. And I think it's also important to know that like I had such a low opinion of myself too. So I thought it was like, well, I have nothing left to lose in my life, so I might as well try. And it sounds terrible to say that, because I don't want it to sound really depressing. But that was my story. I would love to have been that person that was like, yay, I'm finally out. Or, you know, and if you are, that's amazing. But it's also okay to not be that person. You don't have to shit rainbows, you know, to be trans or to be LGBTQ. You are you. And, you know, so I think the problem is we never talk about that fear of like, oh my God, I don't want to face the stigma. Because right now I'm in this cozy little, everyone sees me as a cisgendered male. So there's no stigma there. And I don't know if I want to face that, but it was rough, but it's easier to deal with. And I'm glad I did it.
Gotcha.
Because the one thing I got out of it was I never really smiled ever. Like my mom would yell at me. Like you look at past pictures, there's like that like fake like corner smile. And then one day, a few weeks after I came out to my counselor stopped me dead sentence. She's like, Erica, you're smiling. I'm like, what? No way. Shut up. She's like, you're smiling. And I was like, I'm happy.
Right. I love it. I love it. That's crazy. So we just saw from the Big A Story Slam that you're one of their alum. What was it? I guess, was it this story that you shared, or what was it? I guess sort of what's your message when you're out speaking to folks?
I shared my first, at this point in time, I had not gone through with my suicide attempt to the point I needed to be hospitalized.
Okay.
That was a couple weeks after, but like at the Story Slam, I shared my first suicide experience, which had occurred a few weeks prior.
Okay.
And I shared about how the biggest thing that helped me was my friend seeing me as a person and reaching out to me as a person, and not as the only thing about me as being trans, you know? Right. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes. And it's an important part of my identity. And if it is an important part, that's great, but it doesn't have to be, because I'm also a soldier. I'm also, you know, a dog mom. I'm an academic. I'm a gaming nerd. Like there's so many things about me, and trans is one of them, but it's not the only thing. And my friend at the time saw me as the whole person. And I shared that importance of, hey, it's just reaching out to people. It's showing that kindness, that empathy and compassion. You don't have to come in and save them, but you just have to show them that they matter to you as a whole person.
Gotcha.
So that's what I shared. And it was awesome. So overwhelming. Oh my God. It wasn't overwhelming to share it. But it was overwhelming. It was the first time I was publicly presenting.
Okay.
And two, because a lot of people knew me at my school and stuff. And I we're hearing people around me that were reading my bio, and they're like, wow, she sounds really cool. Like, oh my God, look at like, she was in combat arms and did all this stuff. But the people that came up to me afterwards, and it wasn't the people that were like, oh, we're so proud of you, everything like that, which was great. It was the people that were like, I've never told anybody that I've tried to kill myself, but you standing up there saying that made me realize I'm not alone. And that's, to me, was the most important part.
Yeah.
You know, making sure no one has to feel like they are alone in this world, because we're not. We think we are, but we're really not. Just no one ever wants to talk about it.
Of course. And I think that's amazing. I think that's one of the greatest things about storytelling, is that we often are afraid to share our own story. But then when you do, you realize that you're afraid to share yours, but there are other people who need to hear it. Not for any negative or positive reason, they need to hear that someone else is on that same path or has been there and have survived. And that all they need to hear is, this person survived, I can survive too. And so that's awesome that you sort of got that immediate feedback from doing that.
Yeah, I even had a friend about a month ago, maybe 2 months. She called me at 1 a.m. And my roommate she's a music therapist student. So, and my friend was suicidal. So I asked her to come in as well, to just have a second person just in case. And she had reached out to me because she knew that I went through this and I went to the mental health facility, and she was scared. She was like, well, I'm suicidal, but I don't want to go to the facility because I don't know how I'm going to be treated. And so I think like moments like that are why I think it's important that when we're comfortable and ready to share our story, because that allows other people to be like, wow, maybe if I'm struggling, I can go talk to them, instead of, because like if no one was around, who knows what could have happened. I like to think she would have gotten help, but I know what it's like of being terrified of, okay, well, how's the mental health hospital going to treat me? So
yeah. I want to get back to the idea of you talked about how your dog mom, your soldier, your trans, your athlete, all these things. One of the things that you looked at, I'd like to look at, is the idea of neurodiversity when it comes to athletes, especially for their mental health care. Why is that an important topic?
Because I think that we have this idea that you have this this neuronormative concept, and that means like that everyone thinks the same. And like I thought that I have synesthesia, which means that I think in color and I see things in color, and stuff like that. I thought everyone did that until like 2 years ago when I got tested for autism, which I'm autistic, high functioning autistic on the scale. And I remember sitting in front of the psychologist, and we were just talking about it, and I was like, wait, not everyone thinks this way. And I think that often we are told you have ADHD, you have autism, you have Down syndrome, Asperger's, every single thing, you know, all these neurodiverse not disorders, but diagnoses, that we're lesser, that we have to work harder to be like everyone else. But I argue that we have to work differently. When I started working differently, I was like a D, C student in high school. I failed out of college the first time. But when I started learning differently, teaching myself the way I knew how, all of a sudden, I graduated with a dual degree and 3 minors in 3 years. Like, you know, and I don't say that I'm smart. I don't think I am. But I know how to study and do things towards my capabilities. And so to anyone out there that's like, oh, well, I've had ADHD since I was a kid, or autistic, and I can't do this or I can't do that. If somebody's telling you not to do something or you can't, go and do it, because like in that aspect, obviously don't like jump off a bridge.
Right.
Yeah. Don't limit yourself, because they don't know you and you know your capabilities. And don't think that because you think differently than someone else, they're better. I wish I could be that girl that sits there and memorizes everything and that can be organized. As you can see from my room, I'm not. I'm very bad at memorization, and I have sticky notes everywhere. But like, you know, at the same time, I have so many of those people, the ones that are good at memorizing and everything, saying they wish they could be me to figure out these complex topics and concepts and work and think in these ways. I really do think like people with ADHD and autism and Down syndrome, neurodiverse people are the future, because they're going to bring in ideas and concepts that we haven't thought of before and that we've shut off from them. So,
and it's interesting you say that. It reminds me of Temple Grandin. Is just someone I love, and the work that she's done. And she spoke at, I used to work at Misericordia as a professor, and she spoke and she talked about this idea of neurodiversity and but looking at neurodiverse individuals and the ideas that they have, solving solutions that we have. Yes. The ideas that we can solve on a day-to-day basis. And that, I'm not sure if someone figured out that individuals with dyslexia, if you change the color of the paper or like have different color tinted lenses, it can help them see better. And it's not see, but sort of organize and see things better and stop letters and numbers from moving. And it's that simple solution of print on yellow paper instead of white paper. And your dyslexic students are no longer dyslexic. Well, they are, but like that's not a barrier. And then it came from someone who had a neurodiverse way of looking at things. And say, well, wait a minute. What if we change this instead of labeling and separating them? If this is the simple solution, let's do this. And everyone was like, oh, well, we never thought of that. Well, you didn't, because you're all thinking one way. Bring in someone who thinks differently. So I think it's great that, like you said, that, you know, you don't think wrong or right, you think differently, and that's how you function.
Yeah, and that's how, like, that's my goal in medicine. I'm trying to go to medical school, and everyone asks me, like, well, what kind of doctor do you want to be? I'm like, they don't exist yet, because I want to combine mental health counseling, like therapy wise, and a doctor. And people are like, well, they do. They're psychiatrists. No, that's a different field. And I like both ways of looking at it. Mental health therapy and counseling a lot of the times. And I'm also a feminist philosopher, so like I look at whole person, stuff like that. And the medical field traditionally looks at um, vacuums, things in vacuums. So you have immunology, you have hematology, you have cardiovascular, you have pulmonary, all of these things, all of these important systems of the body that, yes, we need experts in those fields, but they all don't function on their own, outside, away from each other. They all function together. And last time I checked, the brain was in the body, and the brain tells your body how to function, what to do, how to process things. And so if your mind isn't fully tuned, think of it like a radio. If you're not fully tuned into this radio station, you're not going to get a clear signal. So think of that like anxiety, stress, trauma, abuse, stuff like that. So it's going to start sending mixed signals to the rest of the body because the tuning isn't right. And so I think that if we approach medicine in a context of not only looking at it as a direct problem, but as a whole systemic problem, and causes could be elsewhere, I think that we could help with that, especially stuff like chronic illnesses and chronic pain. Like I had 2 back fusions done from getting hurt in the military. My lumbar spine, I have a rod in it. I don't take pain meds. I don't use a cane. I walk, I run fine. I'm an athlete. And it's not because I did anything special. It's because while I was recovering, I was also taking care of my mind.
Right.
I was 23. I relied on my body for everything. I was in combat arms. And I'm like, oh my God, my body's done. What am I going to do? And so I worked on that. And I worked on my mind, my emotional part. And I think because I wasn't fully stressed, fully anxious, all of that energy was focused on healing instead of focused on anxiety. And I want to develop that side of medicine because I think that could help a lot of problems that we have every day, but we just can't seem to find the cure. Well, that's because again, we look at the body as an isolated thing.
Gotcha. And your research was in feminist critique of the mental health system, right?
Yeah, so my honors research at Marywood, I did 2. One of them was on the medical ethics of treating trans adolescents and children. The other one was on a feminist critique of the mental health care system and how it's oppressive towards certain demographics, particularly trans persons.
Okay. And so what? And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask. And so, understanding that aspect of that, our system doesn't work for a lot of people, but that there are real issues for these different pockets. I guess sort of what would you like to see that you want to be this doctor that doesn't exist yet? Looking forward, what would you like to see in the mental health care system? How would you like to see these changes come about in sort of a concrete way that we can begin working on now, even if it's not at the actual therapist, but what we can be doing in our communities to help each other?
I think multidimensional treatment modalities, which that means like people from multiple areas of expertise treating somebody. Right now, like I used to work as a mental health care worker, and we had patients sometimes that would take 15 to 20 different medications just in the morning, and they were zombies, and like half the meds were treating side effects of the other ones. And it's like, look, this obviously isn't working, but that's very traditional right now in the mental health care field. We throw medication.
Right.
We throw medication out, and I think one of the reasons is not only stigma of counseling, but also the fear of counseling, because counseling makes you deal with emotions, emotions that we worked so hard putting away. Why do I want to feel those? And that's hard work. That's such hard work for anyone. And sometimes it's easier to say, well, I'm going to take my anxiety medication. And if you need it, that's great. And you should take it as prescribed by your doctor. But at the same time, instead of just taking the medication, let's work on doing medication, counseling, different treatments and looking at different ways
Mm-hmm.
and different causes. Because I truly do not believe people are born disordered,
Okay.
broken, wrong. Because if you think about it, how do we define mental health? Is it a brain illness where you develop it, or is it a brain disorder where you're born with it? Well, yeah. And what magic system are we saying this is a normal brain? This is
Right.
a non-normal brain? Because
Right.
back in like the 1800s, we were like, the male body is a healthy body, female body is just divergent from it. And so technically, according to medical views, it was that women were disordered naturally because they didn't match a male system.
Right.
So I think that we need to get away from this, and I think we need to start looking at that people aren't naturally disordered, and just because that makes us give up on them.
Yeah. That's crazy.
We write them off and say they'll always be like this, but I think we have such an amazing capacity to change,
Mm-hmm.
to overcome things, and not necessarily be cured, but learn how to live with it.
Right.
Because nothing's ever cured. I'll always have autism. I'll always have gender dysphoria. I'll always have everything. But I can learn to live with it and not let it get in the way of my life.
That's awesome. And I'm assuming Katie's a good friend of yours.
Yeah, I call her my unbiological sister because she was my old platoon sergeant before I came out.
Okay.
And in the military, sometimes people are a little iffy on the whole trans thing. Trans men, they kind of just accept of whatever. Trans women, though, especially in combat arms units, they're like, oh, okay, what's like, the very stereotypical misogynistic idea of it.
Mm-hmm.
And she reached out after I came out fully. And we never really were close friends. Like, I had a lot of respect for her because I think she was an amazing leader and a platoon sergeant. But, like, we weren't like, hey, let's go get a drink, let's go hang out, let's chat. And then she reached out and said, hey, I just want to meet you. Like, I want to understand. I want to learn. You want to come over for dinner? And I did. I met her and her husband and her adorable dog, who is best friends with my dog now. And, she's become I don't want to say it's supporter. She's become more than that, like family. Like, if I have questions or struggles, I know I can go to her and she will, without judgment, answer. And she also, without judgment, will sit there and ask like the hard questions of like, so after hormones, like, what does your groin really look like now? Like stuff like that everyone's afraid to ask because they don't want to offend you.
Right.
But everyone is kind of like, if they knew about it, maybe we wouldn't have this stigma against like trans people.
This is true. This is very true. That's awesome. So we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes because we're running long, and we can do this all day. This is amazing. Yeah. I'm enjoying this. So, but I want to sort of switch gears altogether. And so how has COVID been for you, just personally, just, looking at how the world has changed, sort of how have you been getting by? On this, like, on one hand, it hasn't changed much for me. I'm an introvert. Like, yes, not going to college classes is very difficult for me. I need to be in class in person. Online, I can't do very well. But I think the most frustrating and fearful part of COVID is watching people I know, I love, I care about, I have connections with, fighting and being so overcome with fear that they are latching on to any idea or concept that may rationalize their fear. People not listening to each other, not having empathy. Like, I've never seen social media so negative. And like, there was one moment where I wasn't even talking about COVID. I was talking about new research that is showing that they can do uterine transplants for trans women and that they could actually get pregnant. And it got so toxic that even people that were my friends, I tried to go in and be like, hey guys, let's stop like insulting each other and stop like being assholes, really. And they like turned on me. I was like, oh, you're defending them and you're defending the bigot. And I'm like, y'all are the problem. Everyone's the problem that's like being ignorant here. Ignorance is just sitting there yelling at the brick wall, hoping it's going to change. Yeah.
Like,
it's crazy.
And I had to like take a step back for a couple weeks of like, wait a second, I can't, like, I have to get away from this environment. And unfortunately, because of COVID, we rely so much on social media for our human connection.
Yeah.
So it's like we rely on it so much, but it's turned so toxic, and it's enabled all of these just really like indecent, and it doesn't matter what side you're on. I don't care.
Right.
It like, I even joke sometimes, just because you're trans doesn't mean you can't be an asshole. Like, an asshole's an asshole regardless of who you are. So
Exactly.
So I'd say for me, that's the hardest part of COVID is watching people divulge and turn into this toxic thing that we aren't. Because I know those people genuinely, and they're good people, but then they turn this way, and everyone's kind of feeling that because everyone's afraid. No one knows what to do. They have all of this fear, and they don't know what to do with it, and we lash out. And it's normal. It happens, but it's unfortunate, and I hope the world kind of resolves itself in that aspect.
Yeah, I feel like it's heightened as of late, because we can't get out and do the things that we normally would do. So we're stuck in front of our computer screens and TVs, and everyone's emotions are running high. So yeah, that is the downfall. So ending on a happier note, what has been your joy? What has sort of helped get you through the COVID-19? What's been your joy for the past few months?
I don't know if you could see her. My dog.
Gotcha.
Nina. That's been my joy. Also, school. Like, school's my coping mechanism. Sweetbriar, all the amazing young women there that have brought me in as family. All of the amazing advocacy work. Like, every day I get messages from people like, "Hey, like, thank you. Like, I look up to you," and I'm like, that's bad. You shouldn't. But no, like, so many supportive people, and so many people that are like, thank you for just saying that one thing that one time. And I've even, at 1 a.m. last night, I finally caved into everyone and created a YouTube channel. So that's a thing now, where I just talk about like trans stuff, and I'm going to talk about being a trans athlete, and then at the women's college. But it's like all of the hope and joy, that I'm trying to bring to people. And it's like, it's one of the things that I love about, I'm in a women's Christian group called Delight. And we always talk about taking that negative, whatever bad has happened to you, and changing the world positively with it. And that's what I try to remind myself, because if you can give joy to someone, then that gives joy to me. So that's my joy in COVID.
That's awesome.
Helping people.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Well, I want to thank you for taking some time to talk with me today. This has been awesome. It's great meeting you. This is the first time we've actually met. So, and for all those watching, make sure you tune in next week. I believe Simone Daniels will be guest hosting. I'm not sure who the interviewee is, but Erica, thank you so much. As Katie said, I can't wait to see how you change the world. And so I will be subscribing to your YouTube channel. So you got at least one subscriber. Now you have to make it happen. So
I'm at 14 right now, and I'm so excited.
There we go. So thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Yep, you too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.